I'm going to take it off here. This is a little jacket that I made by taking strips of fabric and using a technique of stitching, top stitching the fabrics together rather than piecing them together. And I was given a couple of panels by a shop, and they said, do something with it. And the panels were great for maybe doing a quilt, but really weren't that great for wearing. So I cut the pieces of the panel up in different designs and top stitched them, appliqued them with top stitch. Underneath, you can see here, I used a pink to contrast so it would really stand out. These are probably my closest thing to doing a quilting, and they're prairie points, and I just felt it needed something down the front to give it a little more color. Anyway. What I do a lot of is weaving. I teach weaving. I use a rigid heddle loom. Now, many people use floor looms and lots of heddles and foot pedals and so on. I don't do that. I use a very simple loom. And to show you how simple we can get with our looms, you can make your own loom. And I do this a lot with workshops, with kids, with adults. And this is just making your own.
Can you move over this way so they can see you a little bit?
Okay, sure. I can, sorry. Anyway, this is just a piece of cardboard. You can go home, cut up a box, and there you go. You've got a loom. Put a little thing. So I've done this with probably 300 kids this year. We didn't do them that big. Let's show you. I've had kids come to, and their parents or grandparents come to my shop. I've also I've done it through the Florida Craft Art and done it at different centers. So there's the loom, little mini loom, and on it we made monsters. And you could, some of them leave them on the little mini loom, and some of them take them off and can wear them. I had one mother and child, and they said this is what they're going to decorate their Christmas tree with this year, little mini monsters. Because I'm part of the guild, I learned some really terrific ways to make little mini looms. This was taught to me by one of our members, Marlene Glickman. We had a workshop, and she taught us how to do this wonderful little pin weaving looms. And off it came something like this. So this was done on the little pin weaving loom, using all kinds, if you're into knitting and crocheting and things like that, or if you know friends, you could pick up all kinds of the ends of balls of things and work them into your little weavings. And I've added ribbons. I made a little button from out of polymer clay, which was another workshop that we've had. A lot of these things I'm showing are just results of wonderful workshops that we've had over the I've taken my last 2 or 3 years. And then the back was another workshop, which is silk dyeing with color hue dyes. Instant setting, wonderful way to show off your little weavings and make a little wall hanging. Now, I love color, I love texture, I just love playing with all these different fibers. So this one was using yarns, using eyelash yarns, which is a little gold color in there that makes it a little fuzzier than usual. I like that one so much, I'm going to wear it. Or maybe I'll wear this one, I don't know. Because, again, I'm using all kinds of different fibers, all kinds of textures. I have ribbons, which I let dangle, because I was too lazy to weave them in. No, I just like that. Anyway, this is just another one that I I've done. They're very much like the ones I have in here. And then one last weaving. The other thing I've learned to do a lot of in surface design is dyeing. And this is all done, this is a natural dye. I'm starting to really get into using things that are not purchased chemicals. So if any of you like avocados,
Yes.
Oh,
save the pits. Get this delicious color of rosy pink or dusty pink.
Wow, that is so
Pink.
pretty.
Isn't that pretty?
Oh, wow.
And then I used others in yarns and just kind of gave it some accents. So this is just wonderful. I've done cotton dresses, cotton skirts, yarns, all kinds of things in the avocado. In fact, I'm going to be doing another avocado pot this week because my local market, vegetable market, calls me up every other week and says she's got some rotten avocados.
oh, perfect.
One day I got 150 or something like that. It took me months to get around to eating an avocado again.
How many does it take to do a large piece like
I'd
that?
say it takes about, I don't know, it doesn't take that many, but I throw in a dozen just to make sure I've got enough there.
I would like to do that with you.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
And it's a great
What fiber
excuse
is
to-
that?
So this is cotton.
Okay.
This is 100% cotton.
It's a great excuse to eat extra avocados, because I have to eat avocados for my friend who needs them.
So you
I have a
dye.
lot of friends that are eating
Yes, you like that.
avocados, plus I get rotten ones from.
So Elizabeth, first you did the yarn, and then you did the weaving after you dyed
Yes.
the yarn.
Mhm. Yeah, I dyed the yarn first, and I have different weights of yarn. I've done it. This one happens to be a worsted weight yarn. It's a boucle type yarn, and then I've done it with fingering weight yarn, cotton yarn. I prefer to use cotton. I haven't tried it with wool yet, just because it's a whole different process, and I'm not sure how it would take with wool. But if I do the dye pot this week, I could always set some aside and throw some wool in, probably with some vinegar. That would work. I'm going to see. So.
And you sew
And
it
this is
together.
only half of it. It's going to be a poncho. See, I've sewed up one half of it. Now I'm going to make the other half. Or you can wear it like a half one. It keeps it from falling off.
Put it over your head.
I could do that too. Yeah.
Like a hoodie.
Like a hoodie. Except it's, I don't know. We'll have to do a fashion show with it. So those are just some of the things that I really like to do. This in here, if you get a chance to come back and see them, this is hand-dyed wool. The light pink was cochineal, and then there was a green, but they're all hand-dyed merino wool. And then in here, this is another cotton where I used turquoise and yellow, and put those two colors together on the same yarn, and then went back in and wove it with, it was a bamboo wool commercial one that I used. The next one is I call it Sayori style, only because I did it on my rigid pedal loom rather than on a Sayori loom, which costs hundreds of dollars to get, maybe thousands. So I just adapted it, and what I do with that is that I put in maybe a half a dozen or more different yarns, because my heddle, I can adjust it. Heddle is the thing you string your yarns through.
Did you use a variable pedal?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I put together a variable heddle with thick and thin holes, slots in it, so that I could put thick yarns and very thin yarns and ribbons and all kinds of things together. So, and then just because I'm easily bored, I created this felted hat, and I felt occasionally, teach felting occasionally. This is a wizard hat, and we have something called Fairy Fest in Gulfport once a year, so I had to have something fanciful to wear, so I made myself this wizard hat, and it even has a little rabbit coming out of the hat. my familiar.
And then you added beads.
And then they added all kinds of beads.
And you got
This is built up in layers. This is like actually a hole, so you put some like thin styrofoam resist in between the two layers, and then this is done with wet felting. Then you put something over that and wet felt it, and then eventually you cut a little hole and you pull that bit of styrofoam out. And actually this was done, if I can show you, this was the way it was done originally with styrofoam. And you have to make it at least a third bigger than what you wanted, because as you're felting, it shrinks 30%. So there was styrofoam, and I cut it open. And then this took about a day to do, because you have to layer off with several layers of wool roving on it, and then you rub it real hard, and then you go back and put more on, and then once you finally get kind of the thickness you want, then you have to cut it open and then get it to go in mold it into a circle. You end up throwing it on the floor and just really felt it. Has anybody ever felted a sweater or socks by mistake?
Yes.
By mistake, yeah. Well, that's basically what felting is. You know, it's soap, hot water, and agitation. That's how you felt. But this is kind of a controlled shrinkage rather than, well, I guess you could throw it in your washing machine, but you wouldn't have as much control. Again, another piece that I felted, and I dyed this piece, and I beaded it, and I also needle felted it. So it's wet felting, dyeing in a shibori style where you tie it up, and I got this interesting kind of stripy and white at the bottom where it was tied tightly. Just wanted it around that area. And then there's once I got it that, and then I had to kind of form it into a shape that might fit somebody. And then on top of that, I wanted it to have, it looked pretty, but it needed something. So I spun some yarn, because I do some spinning as well. So I spun some yarn that was similar color, and then needle felted it with, I have an embellishing machine, which is like an electric needle felter. You don't have to stand there with the needle, because most of the time you have to do that. And then, just because it needed a little something to make it spark, I added a couple of circles of beads. This is based on a painting that inspired me, that was that's on display at the James Museum of Western and Wildlife Art. The artist was Paul Pletka, and he just does amazingly wonderful, surreal paintings. I just loved it. It's called When Ravens Laugh. Well, I don't have access to ravens, but I did have a few crows in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of crows that look at me now because I see this crazy woman with a big lens in the middle of her forehead. So that's what I did with this. And then the Native American in the painting is wrapped in a wool blanket, and on the edging of the blanket is this design. And then there's some other designs, and then this is another edging of the blanket. So I did a lot of kind of trying to piece it together and try to give it some kind of design. The crows in the painting are flying around the guy's head. Can't do that, so people just don't like wearing clothes with, or hats with crows flying around their heads. So I appliqued them. They took those pictures that I took of the crows, turned them into silhouettes, and then cut them out and made patterns for appliques. The inside is also dyed, and it was dyed with tea and rust to give it kind of that little brown and rusty things, rusty objects. And rust and tea creates a black, but I just had enough to kind of scatter around. I wrapped it up and let it rust. It was a rust dye, but it wasn't the whole thing that was rust dye. But here are paintings that I did with crochet and beading. These are nebula. I'm really inspired by the Hubble spacecraft pictures, and I just said, oh, what can I do? And so I spent a lot of mornings drinking coffee and crocheting pieces that I could work into this. And then, because there's gas and something coming off, well, that didn't work. So I added a tool, sewed tool into it, and then maybe a few little squiggly lines, because that's what it looked like, you know. Don't know what they are, but that's what it looked like. And then a few hundred hours stitching beads to it. I was going to do 3, but I got tired of beading. This one is the Rosette Nebula, and this one's based on the Cat's Eye Nebula. And so I just think they're so gorgeous, and the colors were so incredible that the best way to interpret them for me, because I wanted a bit of a 3D effect, was to do a crochet. I don't know how many of you have button boxes. How many have button boxes? And we all love our buttons, and I know we probably played with our mother's buttons when we were little girls. So that's what I call these. I found my mother's button box. And these are kind of, I can't remember their name. Let me just look here. Victor and Rolf are famous designers, you know, European designers. And they came up with a bunch of pants where they sewed buttons of the jeans, and then they did some weaving, and because I like weaving. So I got the jeans and I cut off the legs, and I slashed them and then wove colors into them. And then spent a lot of time, a lot of people donated buttons for this project. They weren't all in my collection. I did have some of my mother's, and those are in there. But that this one, I love these little rose ones. Those were in my mother's. That's cost. And so put those all together, and that was really a fun project. Here is my last piece. I'm sorry I can't really show it to you, but it's a journal, and it's a journal of my life. I've printed photographs on fabric,